The pen hovered over the last page like a loaded gun. Adrian Cole, billionaire tech tycoon, sat at the end of the glass conference table, the city skyline burning gold behind him. The boardroom was high enough that the streets below looked like a different world, tiny, distant, almost unreal. It was the kind of room where mergers were sealed, fortunes were made, and people pretended their hearts weren't breaking while signing away their futures. Today, the person pretending was Adrian. In front of him lay the divorce papers, thick as a paperback, every page a quiet record of how something that started with a promise had ended in a list of terms. Across from him, Elena twisted her wedding ring so hard her skin had turned red. It was the only piece of their life together she still wore. She'd left the penthouse 2 months ago with nothing but 2 suitcases in her pride. No jewelry, no designer clothes he'd bought her, no credit cards linked to his empire. Just that ring she couldn't quite take off, or maybe didn't want to. The lawyers had long since stopped talking. They'd dissected their marriage into assets and liabilities, the house in the Hamptons, the shared art collection, the non-disclosure agreements, even custody of the dog, Hugo, who currently slept on a cushion big enough to be a bed in Adrian's office. Every argument, every tearful night, every unanswered call had been translated into clauses and bullet points. Clean, efficient, cruel. Mr. Cole, you just need to sign here, his attorney said, tapping the last page with a polished fingernail. Her voice was neutral, almost bored. For her, this was just another high-profile client closing a chapter. For Adrian, it felt like standing on the edge of a building, staring at the fall. He picked up the pen, feeling its familiar weight. He'd used this same pen to sign the deal that took his startup public, the one that had turned him from smart guy with an idea into billionaire tech visionary overnight. Back then, Elena had been in the room with him too, eyes shining, hand gripping his as flashbulbs exploded. They'd kissed in a bathroom stall at the after-party, laughing like kids who'd just stolen the world. He wondered when that version of them had disappeared. Was it the first time he canceled dinner because of a late investor call? Or the 10th? Was it the night she waited for him with candles and a homemade meal, only for him to stumble in at 2 a.m., still on a conference call, barely looking at her? Or was it that week when the tabloids ran photo after photo of him with his new female CFO, smiling in ways the headlines didn't bother to interpret kindly? Across the table, Elena kept her gaze fixed on the edge of the documents, as if looking directly at him might shatter what little composure she had left. She hadn't cried in front of him once during this process. Not when the separation was filed, not when they discussed the penthouse, not even when she'd handed back the keys. That scared him more than any tears would have. He lowered the pen and started signing. First line, second line, his signature flowed in practiced strokes, Adrian Cole, as if the muscle memory belonged to someone else. Each page flipped sounded like the turning of a door lock. Their lawyers murmured something about timelines and filing dates, but their voices blurred into background noise. Elena felt every scratch of his pen like a crack in her ribs. She hadn't slept the night before. She'd sat on the floor of her small rented apartment, the one with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall, and gone over her decision again and again. Walk in, sit down, don't make a scene, let him sign, walk out, start over. She'd rehearsed it like a script, but nothing in her script had prepared her for the way his hand shook just slightly as he reached the final page. For the way the light caught on the silver in his hair at his temples, the new lines on his face she hadn't been there to see form. Or for the way his eyes, when they flicked up briefly, looked less like a billionaire and more like the boy who had once confessed he was afraid of losing everything he'd built. He moved the pen over the last signature box, the one that would make it official. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This is it, she told herself. This is what you wanted. Freedom, distance, safety, no more rumors, no more waiting for a husband who belonged more to his company than to you. Except, there was that email. That plan, that threat, the thing she'd discovered that changed everything and yet changed nothing, because she'd used it not to stay, but to walk away. He'll never know, she told herself. He doesn't need to. This is better, cleaner, less messy. But watching the pen touch down, knowing that with one more stroke he'd sign away not just a marriage but the right to ever understand why she'd really left, something inside her rebelled. Her throat burned, her heart hammered, the words pushed up like a tide she couldn't hold back. Wait, she blurted, the words slicing through the room like a dropped glass. The pen froze millimeters from the paper. Both lawyers turned, irritation flickering in their eyes. Adrian looked up, really looked at her, his brows knitting together. Elena swallowed, fingers digging into the edge of the table hard enough to hurt. Her voice came out softer but steadier. "There's something you should know," she said, and for the first time in months, the silence between them wasn't empty, it was electric. For a moment, the room forgot how to breathe. The ticking of the minimalist clock on the wall grew oddly loud, like it was counting down to something neither of them could see. Adrian's attorney shifted in her chair, already annoyed at any deviation from the carefully orchestrated schedule. "Mrs. Cole," she began, tone clipped, "if you have any additional concerns, we can draft in." "It's not a concern," Elena cut in, her eyes still locked on Adrian's. "And it's not about money." That single word, money, hung there like an accusation. In their world, everything was about money. Lawsuits, mergers, charity galas that pretended to be noble while tallying donations like scores. But not this, not for her. His lawyer pursed her lips. "If it's not a legal matter, then perhaps this can wait until after Mr. Cole signs out," Adrian said quietly. The lawyer blinked. "Excuse me," he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. It was the tone that had once made a room full of venture capitalists stop arguing mid-sentence. "You heard me, out, both of you," he added, nodding toward Elena's attorney, who was already half rising, sensing a far more interesting drama than any paperwork. "We'll call you back in when we're done." Elena's lawyer glanced at her as if to ask, "Are you sure?" Elena gave a small nod. She wasn't sure of anything, except that whatever she was about to say, she couldn't say it with an audience. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the room felt bigger and smaller at the same time. The skyline still blazed behind them, but now it seemed like a backdrop to something rawer, more human. Adrian leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. He studied her carefully, like a problem set in front of him with missing data. "All right," he said. "You have the floor." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "3 months ago," she began, "I went to your office. You remember?" He frowned, sifting through endless days of meetings and flights and calls. "We had that board review, the regulatory presentation, and then, you canceled dinner," she finished for him. "You texted me, emergency meeting, rain check, with that stupid winking emoji you use when you want me not to be mad." Her mouth twisted into a small, sad smile. "I'd spent all afternoon cooking your favorite. Had candles lit. Hugo was wearing that ridiculous bow tie you bought him." A flash of guilt crossed his face. He looked down at the torn edge of the papers. "Elena, I decided not to wait," she pushed on, needing to get through it before courage slipped away. "I thought, fine, if he won't make it home to me, I'll go to him. I booked a car and drove to your headquarters. I was going to drag you out of that glass box and force you to remember you had a wife." He almost smiled at the image, Elena storming into a meeting, fiery and relentless. He'd fallen in love with that fire. He'd also done a remarkable job smothering it. "I got there and the lobby security let me up," she continued. "They all knew me. The correction stung. The elevator doors opened and I started walking down the hallway to your office, rehearsing this little speech in my head about balance and priorities and how I missed you." Her fingers twisted her ring again, metal biting into skin. "And then I saw you." The memory snapped into place for him now. That afternoon, the long glass hallway, the sun throwing reflections everywhere. "I was with her," Elena said, the word sharp as broken glass. "Your new CFO. Your game changer. The woman every article suddenly loved. The one with the perfect hair and the perfect clothes and the perfect way of standing too close to you in every photo." He opened his mouth, but she lifted a hand. "You were laughing. I hadn't seen you laugh like that in months." She put her hand on your arm and leaned in, "and you didn't move away. And then I heard it." He swallowed. "Heard what?" "You telling her you'd booked flights. That you'd make it up to her for all the late nights with a weekend away after the merger went through." Her voice cracked on the last words. "You'd canceled 3 date nights with me that month. But you had time to plan a trip with her." Adrian's brow furrowed, the memory rewinding in his head. He remembered the conversation now. "Elena, that trip was—" "I know now what it was," she said bitterly. "A strategy retreat. Investors. Board members. Half the senior team. I know because I hacked into the shared calendar later like some paranoid cliché." She shook her head, but in that moment, all I saw was my husband choosing someone else. Again, silence pooled between them, the building hummed around them, a giant machine continuing its work while two of its most important people quietly shattered. I didn't confront you, she went on softly. I couldn't. I just turned around. Went back down the elevator. The security guard asked if I'd found you. I lied. He winced. If you'd come to my office, you would have talked, she said. You would have apologized and smoothed it over, like you always do. You're very good with words when you need to be. But the image was already burned into my mind. And then the rumors started. Photos of you and her at late dinners with captions asking if she was more than just CFO. Commentary about how I was never around, how the billionaire's wife couldn't keep up. Her throat tightened. I told myself I didn't care what strangers said. But I did. And then, she added, voice dropping to almost nothing, I opened your laptop one night when you'd fallen asleep on the couch. His gaze sharpened. You went through my laptop. Yes, she said simply. And that's when I found it. The email that changed everything. The reason I didn't just leave you, I tried to protect you. She lifted her eyes to his, fear and defiance warring in them. Someone is planning to destroy you, Adrian. And they were counting on me to be the weak point. The words settled over the room like ash after an explosion. Adrian stared at Elena, the logic-driven part of his brain already racing ahead. Destroy you. It wasn't the dramatic exaggeration of an angry spouse. There was a steadiness in her eyes that he recognized from board meetings, from the nights she'd helped him rehearse pitches. Explain, he said quietly. Elena nodded, almost to herself, as if giving permission to finally unburden a weight she'd been carrying alone. That night, she began, you'd fallen asleep on the couch in your office. You were still in your suit, laptop open, a spreadsheet half finished. I came in with a blanket. I was going to cover you and go home alone. Again, he remembered that night in flashes, exhaustion, numbers blurring, the distant comfort of her perfume when she'd kissed his forehead. Your laptop pinged, she continued. A new email. If it had been anyone else, maybe I wouldn't have looked. But the subject line had your name. Strategy for removing Adrian Cole. His chest tightened. From who? From Marcus, she said. Your CFO. The man you trust with everything. The man who's been in this with you since the garage days. Her voice softened for a moment. I know what he means to you, Adrian. That's part of why I didn't want to believe it. He shook his head slowly, denial and dawning horror clashing. Marcus wouldn't. He forwarded it, she interrupted gently. He'd received it, by mistake, he said in the first line. The original email, the one he was forwarding, came from your brother. She held his gaze. From Christian. The name hit him like a physical blow. Memories of shared bedrooms and hand-me-down toys collided with shouting matches over inheritance and board seats. Christian, who'd always been charming and reckless in equal measure. Christian, who'd insisted he wanted nothing to do with the company, until it became profitable. I read the forwarded message, Elena said, fingers tightening around the ring. It laid everything out, a detailed plan to leak, evidence, of fraud to a journalist willing to interpret the numbers their way. Anonymous tips to regulators. False stories about you using company funds for personal expenses. Old photos of you partying spun into a narrative about instability and addiction. Adrian's jaw clenched. He'd spent years keeping his record clean, knowing that at his level, perception was sometimes more powerful than facts. They can't prove what isn't true, he muttered. They don't have to, she replied softly. They just have to make people doubt long enough for the stock to crash. For the board to panic. For investors to demand your removal, for the good of the company. And then, she added, voice dropping, they plan to leverage the wife. He went very still. You, she nodded. The email said I was chronically neglected, socially isolated, emotionally vulnerable. That with the right push, I could be turned into either a public victim or a liability. Maybe both. A drunken photo here, a tell-all, there. They guessed I'd either break down or lash out. And either way, it would be useful. A muscle feathered in his cheek. Christian wrote that, yes, and Marcus saw it. He sent it to you with one line at the top. You need to see this. We should talk. That talk, she said, never happened. Because when I saw it, I closed the laptop. And I made a decision. She took a shaky breath. I decided to become useless to them. How? Adrian asked, voice rough. I filed for divorce. The confession sounded smaller than the impact it had had on both of their lives. I thought, if I walked away, if I took myself out of your orbit, they couldn't use me as leverage. No cheating scandal, No weeping wife on talk shows. No unhinged spouse, dragging your name through the mud. Just a clean break. You'd be hurt, but you'd be safe. Your company would be safe. Your legacy would be safe. He looked at her like he was seeing a stranger and the woman he'd married at the same time. You thought hurting me was protecting me. Yes, she whispered, because you wouldn't have let me go if I'd told you. You would have tried to shield me. You always do, even when you're the reason I'm bleeding. And then they'd have used that. Your weakness for me, your guilt, your love. They knew it, Adrian. They counted on it. He exhaled sharply, standing so suddenly his chair rolled back a few inches. He walked to the window, hands on his hips, staring out at the city he'd conquered. Down there, thousands of people went about their lives, unaware that a few lines of text in an email could topple an empire. What else did the email say? He asked without turning. That they'd time everything with the merger announcement, she answered. They'd create just enough chaos to scare the board into replacing you with someone more stable and less controversial. Christian, he said flatly. Or someone he controlled, she agreed. Either way, you'd be out. They'd cash in while the valuation dipped and reshaped the company in their image. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Then Adrian turned slowly, walked back to the table, and picked up the divorce papers. His eyes skimmed the signatures, the neat margins, the clinical finality of it all. For months, he said, voice low, I thought you left because you were tired. Because I failed you. Because I chose my work over you one too many times. He looked up, his gaze burning. I didn't realize you were fighting a war alone. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. I didn't know how to fight it any other way. He stared at the papers for one more heartbeat, then tore them in half with a clean, decisive rip. Then again, and again, shreds of legal language fluttered to the floor like fallen feathers. Elena gasped. Adrian, I'm not signing away my marriage based on a lie they engineered, he said. Not when the woman I love just handed me the blueprint to their attack. He tossed the last torn piece onto the table and stepped toward her. If you still want to walk away after we deal with them, I won't stop you. I'll give you everything you ask for. But you don't get to sacrifice yourself for me without my consent. A choked laugh escaped her. You're infuriating. So are you, he replied softly. That's why we work. He extended his hand, palm open between them. Not commanding, not demanding, an invitation. Stay, he said, not because you're trapped, not because of vows we already failed to honor. Stay because we're stronger together than apart, and because I'm done letting other people write our story. Elena looked at his hand, at the shredded papers, at the city beyond the glass. The future ahead of them was messy, dangerous, uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like something they could face side by side, instead of back to back in separate battles. She slid her fingers into his, the contact sending a familiar warmth up her arm. There's something else you should know, she murmured, a tentative smile playing at her lips. I never canceled that trip I planned. The tickets are still in my drawer. Adrian's mouth curved, the hard lines of his face softening. Then when this is over, he said, squeezing her hand, we're taking it. No phones, no meetings, just you, me, and a very smug dog in a bow tie. She laughed, a real, unbroken sound. For the first time in months, hope didn't feel like a cruel joke. It felt like a beginning.